Here's something that should be impossible. A Mayan priest in Central America, an Egyptian pharaoh in North Africa, and a Tibetan monk in the Himalayas all draw the same symbol when asked to represent enlightenment. They've never met. They share no language or culture. They're separated by oceans, mountains, and thousands of miles. Yet they draw an eye. Not just any eye, a single open eye surrounded by radiating light. How is this possible? How do completely isolated cultures develop identical symbols with identical meanings? Mainstream history says coincidence. But when you look deeper at symbols like the eye, the serpent, and the cross, you find something far more interesting. These aren't random shapes that accidentally look similar. They might be expressions of something hardwired into the human psyche itself. Today, we're going to explore why certain symbols appear across every human culture in history and what that tells us about the architecture of the human mind. Let's start with the eye because it's one of the most universal and powerful symbols in existence. The all-seeing eye appears in ancient Egypt as the Eye of Horus. It appears in Hinduism as the third eye of Shiva. It appears in Christianity and appears on the American dollar bill in the Eye of Providence. It seems that in Mediterranean cultures, as the evil eye amulet is used for protection. It appears to be in Freemasonry, in Buddhist traditions, in ancient Mesopotamia, and in indigenous American cultures. Everywhere humans have developed civilization, they've developed symbols of the watchful eye. This can't be a coincidence. When something appears this consistently, we need to look for underlying explanations. From a psychological perspective, the eye symbol makes sense when you consider what eyes actually mean to humans. We're social primates who evolved in groups where reading others' intentions was crucial for survival. The human brain has specialized neural circuits just for detecting and processing eyes. Babies are born with an innate preference for face-like patterns, especially eyes. When someone looks at you, you feel it even if you're not consciously watching them. This eye detection ability was essential for our ancestors, who needed to know if they were being watched by predators or evaluated by tribe members. Eyes equal attention, and attention equals either threat or opportunity. This biological basis for eye awareness might explain why the eye became a symbol for consciousness, watchfulness, and divine attention across cultures. The feeling of being watched by something you can't see, whether you call it God, fate, or the universe, is a universal human experience. We project our own eye awareness onto the cosmos and imagine that something is watching us just as we watch each other. The all-seeing eye isn't just a random image that cultures invented independently. It's an externalization of an internal psychological reality, the sense that consciousness itself is watching. Carl Jung, the psychologist who studied symbols extensively, would say the eye is an archetype. Archetypes are universal patterns that exist in what Jung referred to as the collective unconscious. They're not learned or culturally transmitted. They're inherited psychological structures that shape how humans perceive and symbolize experience. The eye archetype represents awareness itself, the faculty of seeing and knowing. When cultures create eye symbols, they're not copying each other. They're drawing from the same deep psychological well that all humans share. This explains why the symbol appears independently with similar meanings everywhere. But there's more to the eye symbol than just awareness. In most traditions, the eye represents spiritual sight, specifically, the ability to see beyond physical appearances into truth or reality. The Egyptian Eye of Horus was associated with restoration and protection. The Hindu third eye represents spiritual perception that transcends ordinary consciousness. The Christian Eye of Providence represents divine omniscience watching over humanity. These aren't just about having eyes. They're about having a special kind of seeing that goes beyond the physical. This universal association of the eye with higher perception suggests that humans everywhere feel there's something more to see, some truth beyond what physical eyes can show us. Now let's turn to the serpent, because this might be the most complex and paradoxical of all universal symbols. The serpent appears in every major mythological tradition on Earth, often with contradictory meanings. In Genesis, The serpent tempts Eve and represents evil. In ancient Egypt, the serpent represents royalty and protection, as seen on the uraeus on pharaohs' crowns. In Hinduism, the Kundalini serpent represents spiritual energy coiled at the base of the spine. In Greek mythology, serpents are associated with healing through Asclepius. In Norse mythology, the world serpent Jormungandr encircles the entire earth. In Mesoamerican traditions, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl was a creator god. The serpent is everywhere, representing everything from wisdom to evil to transformation to eternity. Why would one creature generate such universal symbolic power? Part of the answer is biological. Humans have an innate fear response to snakes that appears to be hardwired rather than learned. Even babies and people who've never seen real snakes show heightened attention and fear responses to snake images. This makes evolutionary sense. For millions of years, our ancestors lived in environments where venomous snakes were a lethal threat. Those who noticed and feared snakes survived. Those who didn't. So we evolved brains that prioritize snake detection and generate automatic fear responses. Snakes aren't just animals to humans. They're emotionally charged creatures that trigger deep reactions. But the serpent symbol is more complex than just fear. The serpent also represents transformation because snakes shed their skin. They appear to be reborn, emerging fresh from an old casing. For ancient peoples who observed this, it was a powerful metaphor for death, rebirth, transformation, and renewal. The serpent became a symbol of the cycle of life itself, the constant process of dying and being born anew that characterizes existence. This meaning appears across cultures. The serpent represents both death and immortality, as well as destruction and regeneration. It's a paradox that captures something true about life itself. The serpent's shape also contributed to its symbolic power. A snake is sinuous, curved, flowing. It moves without legs in a way that seems almost magical. It can coil into a circle, eating its own tail in the famous ouroboros symbol. The ouroboros appears independently in Egypt, Greece, India, China, and Mesoamerica. A serpent eating its tail represents eternity, the cycle that has no beginning or end, the self-sustaining nature of existence. This symbol was invented multiple times by multiple cultures because it captures something fundamental about how humans perceive reality. We see cycles everywhere, in seasons, in generations, in life and death. The serpent eating its tail is a perfect visual expression of cyclical time. From a Jungian perspective, the serpent is associated with the unconscious mind. It lives in darkness, in holes and caves, emerging unexpectedly. It represents the instinctual, the primitive, the aspects of the psyche that are hidden but powerful. The fear and fascination that serpents evoke mirrors our relationship with our own unconscious. We're both drawn to and afraid of what's hidden within us. The serpent represents this dark, powerful, transformative aspect of the psyche that can either poison us or heal us, depending on how we relate to it. This is why the serpent can symbolize both evil and wisdom, both danger and salvation. The unconscious contains both. The cross is our third universal symbol, and perhaps the most interesting because its universality isn't well known. Most people associate the cross exclusively with Christianity, but cross symbols predate Christianity by thousands of years and appear in virtually every culture on Earth. The Egyptian ankh is a cross with a loop on top. The Native American medicine wheel is a cross within a circle. The Hindu swastika, before the Nazis corrupted it, was a rotating cross representing the sun. The Chinese character for 10 is a cross. Celtic crosses combine the Christian symbol with pre-Christian circular designs. Crosses appear in African, Polynesian, and indigenous Australian traditions. Why is this simple shape so universally meaningful? The cross represents the most basic structure of human spatial orientation. Up, down, left, right. The four directions. The intersection of vertical and horizontal. This isn't cultural. It's built into how humans perceive and navigate space. We're upright bipeds who walk on a horizontal surface while oriented vertically. The cross captures this fundamental relationship between the vertical axis of our bodies and the horizontal plane we move across. When you stand with arms extended, your body forms a cross. This isn't arbitrary. It reflects something basic about human embodiment and spatial awareness. Beyond spatial orientation, the cross symbolizes intersection, the meeting point of opposites, heaven and earth, spirit and matter, masculine and feminine. The vertical axis often represents the spiritual dimension, reaching toward transcendence. The horizontal axis represents the material dimension, spreading across the earth. Where they intersect is where humans live, in the middle place where spirit meets matter. This meaning appears across traditions. The cross marks the center, the place where different dimensions of reality come together. It's a map of existence itself. In Christianity specifically, the cross gained additional meaning through the crucifixion of Jesus. But even this Christian meaning builds on pre-existing symbolism. The idea of a divine being suspended between heaven and earth, at the intersection of vertical and horizontal, sacrificed at the crossroads of different planes of reality, connects to ancient symbolism that Christianity inherited and transformed. The Christian cross isn't a break from universal symbolism, but a continuation of it. The archetypal power of the cross shape made it a fitting symbol for Christianity's central mystery. Jung would say that all three of these symbols, eye, serpent, and cross, emerge from the collective unconscious, a layer of the psyche that's shared by all humans regardless of culture. This isn't mystical. Jung proposed that just as we inherit physical structures like hearts and lungs, we inherit psychological structures that shape our experiences. These inherited structures don't determine specific thoughts, but they create patterns, templates, archetypes that different cultures fill in with their particular content. The eye, serpent, and cross are visual expressions of these universal psychological patterns. But there's another perspective worth considering. Some scholars argue that universal symbols might spread through cultural diffusion rather than emerging independently. Perhaps ancient civilizations had more contact than we realize. Maybe sailors or traders carried symbols from one culture to another. This is certainly true for some symbols in some places. But the evidence for the eye, serpent, and cross appearing independently in completely isolated cultures is strong. Mesoamerican civilizations developed serpent symbolism without contact with Egypt or India. Australian Aboriginal cultures developed cross-like symbols without contact with anyone. The diffusion theory can't explain everything. Some universality seems genuinely independent. There's also the biological perspective, which views symbols as expressions of universal human neurology. We all have the same basic brain structures. We all perceive the world through similar sensory systems. We all have the same emotional responses to threats and opportunities. Given this shared neurology, it would be surprising if we didn't develop similar symbols for similar experiences. The eye symbol reflects our visual and social neurology. The serpent symbol reflects our threat detection and transformation recognition systems. The cross symbol reflects our spatial orientation and body awareness. These aren't mystical archetypes, but neurological universals expressed in visual form. The truth probably involves multiple factors. Shared neurology creates similar perceptual and emotional responses across cultures. These responses are symbolized in similar ways because certain shapes effectively capture certain experiences. And once symbols exist, they take on cultural lives of their own, accumulating meanings and becoming more powerful over time. The eye, serpent, and cross are so universal because they sit at the intersection of biology, psychology, and culture, expressing something true about the human condition that transcends any single tradition. So here's my question for you. What symbols have you found personally meaningful in your own life? And do you think their power comes from culture, from psychology, from something spiritual, or from some combination of all three? Drop a comment and share your thoughts. I'm genuinely curious how people experience symbols in their own lives. Understanding universal symbols matters for more than academic reasons. These symbols appear in our dreams, our art, our religions, our advertisements, our logos. They speak to us on levels we're not consciously aware of. When you see an eye, your brain responds in ways that predate your individual existence. When you encounter a serpent image, ancient neural circuits activate. When you see a cross, your spatial and spiritual awareness is engaged. These symbols have power precisely because they're universal. They reach beneath cultural conditioning to touch something deeper in the human psyche. The psychological significance of symbols is that they provide bridges between the conscious and unconscious minds. Jung believed that engaging with symbols was essential for psychological health and development. Dreams communicate through symbols because the unconscious speaks in images, not words. When we consciously engage with symbols, meditate on them, create them, and explore their meanings, we open a dialogue with deeper parts of ourselves. The eye invites us to develop awareness. The serpent invites us to embrace transformation. The cross invites us to find our center at the intersection of different dimensions of existence. These aren't just pictures. They're psychological tools for growth and integration. This is why symbols appear across human history in sacred and spiritual contexts. Our ancestors understood intuitively what modern psychology confirms scientifically. Symbols have power. They connect us to something larger than our individual selves. Whether we conceptualize that something is God, the collective unconscious, or simply shared human nature. When you see an eye in an ancient temple and feel something stir inside you, that's not imagination. That's recognition. Something in you responds to something universal in the symbol. That response is what makes symbols powerful and what explains their persistence across all human cultures. The fact that isolated cultures develop identical symbols with similar meanings is one of the strongest pieces of evidence we have for psychological universals. It suggests that beneath our cultural differences, humans share a common psychological architecture. We perceive, feel, and symbolize experience in similar ways because we're the same species with the same basic neurology and psychology. The eye, the serpent, and the cross aren't just interesting curiosities. They're windows into what it means to be human. They show us that despite our surface differences, we're all drawing from the same deep well of human experience. The next time you encounter one of these symbols, whether on a dollar bill, in a piece of art, in a religious context, or in your dreams, pause for a moment. Consider that you're looking at something that has spoken to humans for tens of thousands of years. Consider that the response you feel, whether fascination, reverence, fear, or curiosity, is a response your ancestors felt too. These symbols connect us across time and space to every human who has ever lived. That's not mysticism. That's psychology. And it's one of the most profound things we can learn about ourselves. If this exploration of universal symbols changed how you think about psychology, culture, and the human mind, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're exploring the patterns that shape human experience, the psychology that transcends culture, and the questions that matter. Thank you for thinking deeply with me. Remember, symbols aren't just shapes. They're mirrors reflecting something true about what we all share as human beings.